Director Richards, what do we have next?
Mr. Chairman, the first agency of your callbacks, so they have already presented their budget, is Agency 77 on your books, the Department of Enterprise Technology Services.
Great.
And I believe at least one member, I'm trying to refresh some memories back in December, at least one member expressed some interest in discussing the depreciation reserve account and what those funds may or may not be used for and when.
Okay. It's all yours. Good to have you back.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. My name is Jeff Kleins. I'm the Director of ETS, and with me I have Erica Legursky, the Deputy of ETS, and Kristen Burkhart, our CFO. And we are ready for questions and dive into.
I think you've got one already.
So I will turn it over to Kristen to talk about the depreciation reserve.
Mr. Chairman, thank you for having us back again. So questions about depreciation reserve. We think there's a couple of different options for us to utilize these funds. I looked at the fund balance before we came over. It's at $621,000 and some change. I'll just start with a little background real quick. We did talk about this at our hearing, but basically when we bought IT infrastructure out of our internal service fund, we then used the depreciation from those assets and put it into this depreciation reserve fund. There were only 2 assets that were currently being depreciated when we met in December. Those both are fully depreciated now. And so we also talked about how the future of IT purchases is no longer infrastructure. It's more cloud-based. And so we don't anticipate having any significant IT infrastructure purchases going forward. And so there are a couple of options for how we can utilize these funds. It does need to be utilized within the internal service fund itself. We can work with the state budget department to move those monies over and use that money to pay our SWICAP bill that we have every month. We can also, with your approval, move that money over to the ISF fund and utilize it towards either one of our exception requests that are in the internal service fund. One we would recommend is the cloud service request that we have for about $1.4 million. Or we could use it for some existing expenses that we have coming up that are maybe already budgeted for. And so those are the options we have. We talked about, we were getting ready to have an audit. We thought about waiting to see what comes from that audit if we want to wait and utilize it after the audit, but we're fully open to the discussion on proceeding forward with that. So we'll stand for any other questions.
Questions, anyone? Representative Sherwood.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman, and thank you for joining us again. It's good to see you guys. Happy New Year. Can you make sure that I understand correctly in terms of the assets that had been depreciating and going into this account? Were those originally purchased with federal funds? And just so I'm understanding, is there any federal funding sort of tied to this we should be aware of as we contemplate reallocation? Thank you.
Mr. Chairman.
Yep.
Thanks for the question, Representative Sherwood. So none of those assets were purchased with federal funds. It was all through the internal service fund, and that internal service fund, the money in that account, our budget is spending authority only, but any money that we have sitting in there is money that we've billed out to agencies and they've paid for those services. So there are no federal funds attached to these assets. It's all special. I wouldn't even call it special revenue. It's categorized as special revenue, but it's from fees that or rates we bill out to agencies.
Follow up?
I thank you for that. And I will have a few questions here just because I'm really trying to understand this fund in the future. Do we know for sure that those agencies that were billed didn't use federal funds for that purchase. Again, just trying to make sure we're not like tripwiring something here. And maybe this is why there is a concern about, do we wait for the audit to be done and then reallocate these funds? Sort of pros and cons to that. Thank you.
Mr. Chairman, Representative Sherwood, I would have to go back and look to see if I can tell how agencies paid. I'm sure some agencies have paid us with federal funds for that. It's not specifically tied to the asset itself. And what was the second part of your question? Sorry. Oh, the audit. I think really the only reason we were sort of waiting on the audit was just when the three of us started, there was just a lot of things that were coming up that we were trying to wrap our brain around. This was one of them. Since then, right, since you all started asking questions, we've done a lot of consulting with other folks about it that used to work at the agency and how best can we handle that. And so I think we feel comfortable without the audit proceeding forward if we needed to.
Yes, just keep, you
Okay.
got it.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. And for context, ETS is my agency, so I want to make sure I'm doing a good job of presenting this on the
Thank
floor
you.
as well. Okay, so you guys have dug in. Thank you so much for that. My understanding is as we move towards purchasing more software, cloud-based assets, we won't have a physical asset to depreciate. There was some talk, I think, about, is this fund not going to be needed in the future? And, what does that look like to start to like whittle it down or zero it out? So maybe walk through a process, and would love to hear from Director Hibbard too on what that would look like or how we could envision that. So that's the one question about, does this fund need to exist? What does it look like to close it out? I'll have another question later. Thank you.
Mr. Chairman, thank you. I think it's just, I think it's as easy as working with you guys and the state budget department and the state auditor's office, just to come up with a game plan and how we want to spend those funds. We can move those funds over, I believe, with a B11, which would give us the spending authority in the internal service fund to then spend that where you wish us to spend it. And then we would just close that fund out permanently from there. But Director Hibbard may have additional comments on that.
Mr. Chairman,
Yes, who's talking? Yes, Director Hibbert.
I believe the first step that I would take is to look at the history of the fund and calculate the interest earnings on that fund through time. And if that interest earning isn't greater than the fund balance, then we avoid any federal entanglements. I think that would be the first exploratory exercise I'd have. And if we've eliminated that, Representative Sherwood, then the choice is like any other special revenue fund. You can just decide how you'd like to proceed with the use of those funds. And I believe the intent is to close the fund. So let's just see if our interest earning is greater than the current cash balance, and then we are comfortable with whatever you guys decide you want to do.
Who else? Follow up?
Mr. Chairman, Erica Legursky, Deputy Director, ETS. I think that we could look at that. But yeah, we're not sure what the interest balance is on that, Representative Sherwood, so we could look at that and get back to you. And then see, my guess would be that, I don't know if that would be a fund that would have its interest earning go to the general fund, or if it would get to keep its own interest earnings. And so we would need to look and see where those interest earnings went within that fund. I'm not sure about that at the top of my head.
Follow up.
Yes.
Thank you. I appreciate the committee's patience with me. So it seems like we have potentially some options about how to use the fund to either pay, I heard option one, pay for this YCAP. Option two, move it to the IFS fund to cover an exception request. I think the one you mentioned was the 1.4 for cloud service. Wondering if based, again, on an intent, would your priority number 7, which is the application firewall, load balancing. Do you feel like that would be an appropriate use of that fund? Thank you.
Please.
Mr. Chairman. do you wanna-
That's a general fund.
Oh, okay. Director Kleins just reminded me that one's a generally funded exception request. And so it's my understanding that we're not able to use that depreciation reserve account on generally funded items since the assets were originally purchased out of the internal service fund. So we would need to use it on internal service fund purchases. Does that? Okay, sorry.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. It makes sense. I was just trying to
I know.
find a way to
I tried.
preserve some general funds.
I know, that's where I originally went when we left here in December, and it just doesn't sound like
Mr.
we have
Chair,
that ability.
Thank you.
Technically, if you're looking at the choice of the statewide cost allocation, and I'm not suggesting that this is the direction that we go. You could consider that ETS is in position to pay for that cost allocation normally. And whatever they don't use then would be, if you use it on a statewide cost allocation, would relieve them from having to come up with funding on their side of the fence. So essentially, it would revert if that would be the intent that they'd have. Now, the catch would be if it's a general fund supplantation, and I think that that's a little bit uncomfortable for us. But otherwise, if they have more money than they need to pay for the cost allocation in some fashion because they have paid for internal service fund asset, then they would ultimately most likely have a reversion.
All right, my last one, I think. Or go ahead. I interrupted
Well,
you.
And this, Director Hibbert and I can take this off, but we pay all of our SWICAP out of the internal service fund, so I don't think we would revert any of that.
Yeah, I think I understand, Kristen. And then what you'd have is your internal service fund would have a balance then.
Well, it always has a balance, but yeah,
And typically, do we hold internal service balance or revert them?
we don't revert them, is my understanding.
Mr. Chairman, I would like to work with the ETS on
Yeah.
this and get you an answer. And I think the best way to go is to see if they've got interest earnings on it and see if we can get out of the federal entanglements on that aspect of it.
Perfect.
Yes, Representative Harrelson.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. So thank you guys for coming back, and I'm actually going to go into your account 0292 and 0242, which is your software hardware conversation. 5.2 million for hardware and 3 million for software, new expenditures. Talk to me a little bit. I know we talked about how we're working on trying to replace old equipment. But I'm just looking at this going, if this is an increase that we're seeing, what are we looking at down the road? What's the projection of this, especially on the software side? Because it seems like a pretty large, I mean, as we saw agency after agency after agencies coming with their TRP requests, and we're seeing all of these increases to these software licenses. Is there a bell curve to this? I mean, where are we at on that curve? And then also with that, we had a number of agencies that said, hey, we don't need all these new computers. We need 3 new computers to be sitting in reserve. And if we have a problem, we're ready to rock and roll with them. Can you kind of give us a little bit of that conversation? And I understand in the grand scheme of things, this is it's a smaller concept. I mean, we're talking 8 million total, 8.3 million total basically, but still, I'm trying to kind of get my head wrapped around this. And I understand we're going to more software licensed based systems, but can you talk a little bit more on that? And maybe we can just have a little more discussion.
So I can speak. Let me first address the computers and the refresh cycles and things like that. So I understand some agencies want to, I'll just keep it until it breaks or dies and stuff like that. whereas ETS is recommending more of a proactive approach. A lot of that is for, workforce planning and things like that. For us to wait and be reactive when a computer dies and then try to recover data and systems and processes, and the downtime for the state employee while they wait, why we do that is it's a lot more work on my team to be reactive in that manner. So our recommendations are we try to focus on proactive replacement of the computers and stuff like that, rather than waiting until they die. Simply because, if there's data on somebody saving something on their computer and it's not backed up and they lose it, it could take days, if not weeks, to recover stuff, if it's recoverable at all. And if it's not, then what's that impact to the user? So when we talk about, replacing computers on that cycle, that's one of the many reasons why we're driving for that proactive nature. Now, the 3.2 million is basically TRP. Let me read this real quick. So, okay. Oh, so that's the total TRP book. Okay. Yeah, so and that's so the 8 million is that TRP budget book. So the 3 million or the 5 million would be that hardware cost to proactively replace that hardware. And the 4-year is a recommendation kind of generally accepted. A lot of the computer manufacturers push for a 3-year. We stretch it to a 4-year. We say we'll do 3 years under maintenance, and then the 4th year we will repair as it breaks down or something, or anytime something breaks, we'll do a cost benefit analysis to say, is it cheaper just to replace the computer or buy the parts to fix the computer type of approach there. So that 5 million on the TRP side is simply just to do that proactive replacement of the stuff. Again, we're aiming for about 50% of the devices per biennium to be able to replace on that 4-year cycle, to be able to do that. The software, this is going to be a lot of that, going to a subscription-based software, and it's going to become a recurring charge. Microsoft Office, Google, Adobe, they're moving away from all of these one-time perpetual licensing costs to a subscription-based cost type of stuff. And that's driving majority of that software cost, is that subscription-based model that we see agencies or vendors going to. And as far as where we're at in the bell curve, I only anticipate it getting more and more as companies try to drive more and more revenue and licensing tactics and things like that. So we do lose a lot of that budgetary control when we get into that subscription model, just in my personal opinion.
Sounds good. So another question for you, Mr. Chairman, and Director. So as we look at bringing these number of devices out of your guys's, out of basically the agency's hands, bringing them back in, I know you guys scrub them and then you sell them, or you have the opportunity to sell them. And I know we talked about back in December, what does that actually look like? What does that entail? And how much is that? Did we get a number on, like, what are we bringing in on the sale of these old computers, these old laptops? And do we kind of have a little bit of an idea of what that turnaround is on that 4-year?
Yeah, Mr. Chairman. So good. So we partner with the Department of A&I, and we sent them a message. I don't have the number off the top of my head. So surplus, the Department of A&I coordinates the sale of all of those. So specifically, as far as hardware sales from computers, you don't have that number, do you? So well, we will look to see if we have that number, but I think that's a volunteer director, Bach, but she might have that too. So we will look, if we have that right here in the next minute or two, we'll give it to you. If not, we will follow up again, make sure that gets to you. Or Director Hibbard might have that.
Mr. Chairman, as far as the bell curve, in 2021, the TRP budget was 10.4 million. This ask is 8.2. So right now we're curving lower than we have in the past. And I'm going to throw out 2023s because there was a large hardware purchase, but it was 32 million. But if you go back to 21, in a similar fashion, we're actually underspending what we were previously.
Okay, other questions? We're on Representative Smith.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Quick question as far as with IT support with the different state agencies, what is your average response time when an agency needs help and potentially there's no IT person in a community where a state agency is held.
Mr. Chairman. Yeah, Representative Smith, that's a great number. And there, we have a lot of metrics that we can get you that's more detailed. Generally, our time to resolve is less than 1 business day. However, you brought up a specific, scenario where we don't have IT, say, in a specific community. And I'll pick on the Wyoming Law Enforcement Agency in Douglas because they specifically had an ask where they needed somebody local to be able to be timely. Because we dispatch out of Casper to be able to support Douglas currently. And so in those instances, we do our best to be able to support and resolve things remotely. We have a lot of tools that allow for remote support. We do a lot of first call resolutions just remotely. But in the case where you need hands on keyboard, there is that dispatch and the drive time needed to get to remote locations. I mean, that's a story that's repeated several times. We don't have local IT support in Jackson or other areas where they'll drive up from Evanston and stuff to be able to support those remote locations. So in that time, there is a delay and there is a time frame impact. I can't tell you what impact that specifically has, but I can ask my customer service team to see if they have that measured where we can get you that detail.
Follow,
Yeah, go ahead.
as far as customer service for the state agencies, has your agency done any customer service satisfaction surveys to find out where you can be needing needs in these type of communities? And then other final question would be, as far as like AI coming and the need for security and stuff like that, are you seeing any point where security is preventing like the mission of the state agency? You know, I can't do this because of security or things like that.
Mr. Chairman. Representative Smith, thanks for that question. So we do talk to our agencies periodically. I'm not sure if we have one in particular that we've done within the time that we've been there for a satisfaction survey, but I do know that in one of the couple of years ago when we did the ANI ETS consolidation conversation, we had a lot of conversations with agencies and agency directors. Actually, our customer service portion was very favorable. Agencies thought that we did good response time. We were able to fix their issues, make sure that they had computers up and running. Where we kind of ETS fell a little short, I would say, is in the asks that we have for the business relationship managers and that BRM of being that strategic partner. That's really what the agencies are looking for us as someone for more of that strategic partner so that we can help with those efficiencies and economies of scale. But they seem to be pretty pleased, if you will, with the customer service that they get kind of on the day-to-day operations and answering those questions for support.
And Mr. Chairman, for the second part, I'd like to just on the artificial intelligence and the security. There's always conversations we have where at times we'll talk to agencies and we'll deny a request or something for fear of security or something. We're pushing really hard to make sure those are conversations with agencies to make sure they understand the risks and things. If we see something where we feel like a denial is necessary, we're working towards moving that to a conversation so the agency can understand the risks of X, Y, and Z software or hardware and why that would be a concern for the security of the state so that a more detailed discussion and decision can be made based on those risks as well. So hopefully that answers your question.
Does that answer your question? You've got a minute. Go ahead if you want.
Yeah, I'm happy for a follow-up.
Okay. Any other questions? Okay, I want to thank you for coming. Appreciate the follow-up, and so thanks again. Director Richards, what's next?
Mr. Chairman, one more agency, also a callback, Agency 10 in your books, Department of Agriculture. I believe Director Miyamoto and his team, Julie Cook, Mr. Budd, are here to respond to any questions. You will recall the committee had a somewhat lengthy query regarding meat packing plants and the regulation thereof. And I think there were some lingering questions on that topic and maybe others.
Hey, Director, good to have you here. Why don't you introduce yourself and your staff, and then you know what the issue is. Maybe you can talk about it. So, floor is yours.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Good afternoon, committee. Doug Miyamoto with the Department of Ag. With me today, I have Joe Budd. He's the Deputy Director of the Department of Ag. And I have our Administration Division Manager, Julie Cook, with me as well today. We did have quite a bit of discussion about regulations of meat plants the last time that we were here talking about our budget generally. We had some follow-up question that we tried to respond to. And that question had to do with the cost of the state's meat program. The way this works is that all of our meat inspection falls under the jurisdiction of USDA, but they can deputize essentially states to do meat inspections on their behalf. And then there's a program for reimbursement where you can recover 50% of the cost of doing those inspections from USDA. So what we were reporting on here was the total amount or the expense of doing all of those inspections over the past several years and the amount of reimbursement that we recouped from USDA as a result of doing those inspections. And if there's any questions about those figures or any other information that we can provide, be happy to do that.
Okay, questions on this? Anyone would like to dive into it further? Anyone? Anyone? Wow.
Me.
Well, yes, Mr. Vice.
Just a little slow on the button here. So as I understand it with our state supremacy or whatever we have to do all the USDA does and then whatever else we choose. Is that correct?
Correct.
Mr. Chairman, Senator, we have to carry out the provisions of the Federal Meat Inspection Act. Yeah, that is correct. Now, that doesn't mean that our state inspectors are doing the exact same things as a federal inspector would be. We have to achieve what's known as an equal to standard. So we have to be able to prove with documentation and through audits that we're providing the same level of safety in our inspections, even though we might get there a slightly different way than would a USDA inspector, but we do have to achieve the same standard, yes.
Follow up?
Mr. Chairman, yeah, I'll kind of wander on a little. Looking at your website, we've got 21 custom plants, 6 state plants, and 10 USDA plants. Can you explain those 3 different categories, what the differences are and how they operate differently?
Absolutely, Mr. Chairman, Senator. So starting at the highest level, those would be your USDA inspected plants. And those plants are typically higher capacity plants. They have facility requirements that we discussed the last time that I was in this hearing about what the facility must contain, the software that they use, the method of inspection, frequency of inspections, frequency of sample submittals for bacterial swabs, things like that. That's the highest level. So it's typically also the most expensive level for a processor to achieve would be that USDA level of inspection. In those instances, that's when USDA will send out inspectors. They reside in those plants and they provide the inspection. All of the product that comes through those plants are eligible for interstate shipping, international shipping, and the carcass will have a stamp on it that says USDA inspected. And that has the highest level of flexibility, meaning those can be sold anywhere. And that has, the backing of the USDA essentially, and those are export-ready carcasses and meat products. One level down from that is state inspection. There's 27 states, including the state of Wyoming, that have a state meat and poultry inspection program. That also has a stamp that goes on the carcass. And what that stamp authorizes is the sale of meat products within the boundaries of that state. But those products can't leave the state of Wyoming for retail sale. They're also not eligible for international trade. So if you have smaller meat plants that don't want to invest in that type of facility where they have to build an office for an inspector, they have to build a separate bathroom for an inspector, they have to have all these different requirements and they have to buy the USDA software. If they don't want to invest that much and they have enough of a market locally where they can they can take processing in and all of that be resold locally. And that's the level of inspection that they need. They can do that for much less money. And so that typically describes a state inspected facility. Those products are going into restaurants, they're going into grocery stores, but they're going into those places in Wyoming. And then a level down from that is where you find your custom exempt processing. That's a misnomer in the name. I have never really liked custom exempt processing because it indicates that you're doing custom harvesting and you're doing a custom cutting of a carcass that was ordered that way. The reality of custom exempt processing is it's for personal use. So that's an exemption from some of the standards for ranchers. So if you are a rancher and you own livestock, you're the one that's going to be consuming that livestock, that animal and all of its meat products, then you're accepting the risk if there was any disease or there was something wrong with that carcass where it wasn't wholesome. That was yours to begin with. And so the liability stops with you. But the custom exemption is really a personal use exemption. It does not require the same level of inspection as does state inspection and as does federal inspection. We don't have inspectors in custom exempt processors every day. We only have them in those facilities once or twice a year to check on the documentation, make sure that the humane handling provisions of the Federal Meat Inspection Act have been adhered to, and that the sanitary conditions requirements of the Federal Meat Inspection Act are also being adhered to and are being documented for. And that's the only level of inspection that we have in a custom exempt facility, because those carcasses are going to go back to that rancher, their families, their non-paying guests, their day workers, that type of personal use. But those are not eligible for retail sale. And those meat products are also not eligible for donation or anything outside of personal use of that meat. So those are the three levels,
Mr.
Senator.
Chairman.
Yes,
follow up.
please.
So the custom exempt, and I wasn't listening close enough, I guess. How many times a year do you inspect them and how often?
The custom exempt, if everything is going right and the facility has a record of being clean with good documentation, we'll be in there once a year. And then there are indicators in our inspection forms that would necessitate more frequent visits if there's something that's missing in the document, the file, or if there's a follow-up or something that we need to check on again to make sure it's been addressed appropriately. But typically speaking, we're not in there very often.
And how many, follow up?
Yes, please.
And how many inspectors do we have presently in Wyoming?
Oh,
And
I
what's
have
total
that number.
cost of the program?
State inspector.
Mr. Chairman, Senator, I'm being told that purely for inspection purposes, there's 18.
Is what?
18.
18, okay. And what's the total cost of the program? Our inspection program?
Let's see, it varies somewhere between about, it looks like it's about, I don't know, yeah, $600,000 over the past 3 years. It has been 541,000, 316,000, and 543,000. We recoup half of that from USDA at the end of the year based on how many inspections we did.
So we have 18 inspectors and $500,000 total budget on everything, the vehicles and everything they do.
Mr. Chairman, Senator, that's correct. Keeping in mind that those inspectors also do additional duties beyond just meat. Dairy resides there and other consumer health inspections, pool inspections also reside in that
So what
program.
percentage of it is meat inspection?
Mr. Chairman, Senator, It obviously varies a little bit by location and how many plants are there, but I could do some number crunching and try to come up with a figure for you. 20 to 25% is what I'm being told.
Okay, so let's go with Senator Larson and then Representative Alleman and then Representative Angelos.
So these place, Mr. Chairman, thank you. So where this, the custom, the state and USDA cutting facilities are, do they pay to have the inspectors there, or is it all general fund, or how does that work?
Mr. Chairman, Senator, they don't pay per inspection. They pay a small licensing fee to have a commercial food license. But the reality of it is, regardless of inspection, the source of that funding is state general fund, and it's matched with USDA federal funds.
Mr. Chairman, how do you deal with wild game? So that would be custom facilities?
Mr. Chairman, Senator, we don't have any jurisdiction for wild game at all. So if you're a processor that does wild game, there's no requirement for inspection from us. Now, that being said, there is a statute in the game and fish statutes that say if that wild game is destined for donation, they want those facilities to be inspected just for sanitary conditions. So they would have a commercial food license and we would go in and make sure it's clean, but we would not be doing any inspection of the carcass or anything like that when it comes to wild game.
Mr. Chairman, follow up.
Yeah.
I'm hearing different from some people in my area that they're being inspected when they only do wild game and not having very good luck.
Mr. Chairman, Senator, they do not require inspection for participation in commerce if they're strictly doing wild game.
If there's any questions, they can call the director.
Yeah.
Directly. Representative Alleman is next.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Thank you for being here today. How many plants do you have that you inspect in Wyoming?
Mr. Chairman, Representative, currently, I believe that number is 38. I'll verify that.
That you inspect?
The Wyoming Department of Agriculture, yes.
Okay. Is there a poultry inspection that is a USDA inspection site in Wyoming?
Mr. Chairman, Representative, not currently, no.
Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Thank you for coming, Director. I do have a question on the state. So I'm showing that you have 6 state packing plants. Do those have to have a bathroom? Do they have to have an office? I know we have to meet or exceed USDA, so that's where I think even some of my custom processors are like, oh yeah, they have all that. Could you confirm that? And then I'll have a follow-up question.
Mr. Chairman, Representative, we don't have a requirement for dedicated office space and bathrooms for state inspection, no.
Follow-up. Thank you, Mr. Chairman. My other question would be, once a packing plant has had a violation, how many times are you then checking on them? Is there a set schedule? I'll be really honest, my packers that have had a violation feel that they are being targeted and that then they're being followed up on and then nitpicked. So we've had this discussion before, but how many times is there a schedule? Are they checked up on? And if you could answer that question.
Mr. Chairman, Representative, there's no dedicated schedule for that, or there's no specific number that's attached to it. It's typically checking back until it's addressed, until whatever issue has been addressed. And I'm sorry, what was the second part?
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. If I can get my microphone to work. I think it was more of a statement of I'm hearing from my meat packers that they feel targeted once they do have a violation, that they're being nitpicked, that little things are coming up that were fine before and now they're not. So.
Mr. Chairman, Representative, we try to do everything that we can to stay out of the punitive aspects of inspection. We try to provide the information that is needed, but it's very seldom, I don't think we've never, or at least in my time at the Department of Ag, haven't issued any fines. And we try to avoid any of that type of punitive address to the plants, but do understand that we have a lot of pressure on us for in-plant audits that happen either yearly or biennially. And in the past, it's been very important for us to make sure that those plants have all the papers in their file that they need when the Enforcement and Compliance Division of USDA comes in and walks through the plant and looks at everything and all of the past records. So we have been admittedly adamant about making sure that things are clean and in order, trying to essentially give those processors the answer to the test before the exam happens. But understand that that's not an easy process for us to shepherd through either. It is difficult.
Okay, any other questions? Mr. Vice Chair.
Mr. Chairman, thank you. Can you tell me roughly USDA software, the difference in cost yearly between a USDA plant and a state inspected plant? You said software, and I understand the bathroom they have to have supposedly. But what are the other costs? What's the total difference?
Mr. Chairman, Senator, we don't have any, we don't have access. We've never had anybody that has applied to do like cooperative interstate shipping with us. And so I don't have an estimate for you on how much that costs because they would be going through that process with USDA and not us. So if I gave you a total, I'd be guessing.
Okay, and so it's the software and the bathroom is the two main differences.
Mr. Chairman, Senator, it depends on the plan review packet that is submitted before the plant is opened. And typically the difference in expense would scale along with the plan capacity for that plant. How many rails would have to go in? They might have different sizing requirements than we would. And so I don't know if you could, it'd be difficult to ascertain without a specific example. So if I had a plant that was going to open and you said we wanted to do 3 dozen animals per week under a state inspection, I could probably come up with some kind of estimate of what that would be versus what it would cost to do that on a USDA basis. But without a specific example, it's kind of hard to say.
Mr. Chairman, follow up.
Yep.
So you brought up another, so what's the average animals per week out of our plants? We got 30-some plants. What's that? Because I'm guessing it's less than 50 across the state, but I was just curious.
Yeah, Mr. Chairman, Senator, I would say it's between 12 and 2 dozen.
Between what?
Between 12 and 2 dozen per week.
Okay,
Some of them are very small.
thank you.
Okay, anything else? Director, thank you so much for being here. Appreciate it. Thank you for callback. And Director Richards, can you give us a kind of a brief for what we'll be looking at tomorrow?
Yes, Mr. Chairman, members of the committee. Agency-wise, you'll start off with the Wyoming Board of Tourism, then followed by the Guardian Ad Litem, Fire Prevention, Electrical Safety, Wyoming Gaming Commission. The big lift, if you will, is in the afternoon, and you have a callback for the Wyoming Department of Health and your first scheduled discussion of the Rural Health Transformation Program. That will likely be involved or involve later legislation. In fact, I believe the Department of Health has submitted some draft legislation for you to consider in your packet. Just for public notice, I would also alert folks who intend to comment publicly. That is scheduled for 11 a.m. on Friday. We have opportunities to sign in here at the credenza as well as online. To date, you have 3 members of the public who would like to comment on the entire budget process. Finally, if I might add one more comment, the agent or the committee has requested 7 additional agency callbacks, and that's inclusive of tomorrow's callback with the Department of Health. The other agencies, just to notify them and the members of the committee that are on that list, include the Secretary of State, the Department of Administration and Information, State Parks and Cultural Resources, the Livestock Board, the University of Wyoming, and the Wyoming Business Council. Depending on your pace, we may, with the chairman's direction, try to slip in 1 or 2 callbacks per day, pending the pace and the preferences of the co-chairs. But those are scheduled to, any ones we don't address beforehand are scheduled to appear at 1 p.m. on Friday. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Thank you. So just for the committee's information, I think we really got a lot done today. I know there's a number of meetings still this afternoon, individual legislators talking to individual folks. So 8 a.m. tomorrow, is that right? Okay, good. Appreciate it. We'll adjourn till 8 a.m. in the morning.